The last thing I remember was screaming at my tablet screen so loud I'm pretty sure my neighbors thought I was being possessed. Are you serious? I yelled, slamming my fist into my pillow. William, you absolute walnut. You're the king of the North, not the king of idiots. How can you believe Kuro? He literally fell onto a pillow and claimed it was a miscarriage. Men can't even, oh wait, it's an Omegaverse novel. But still, the character Leo, a beautiful but tragically dim-witted Omega, had just been dragged to the chopping block. His final words were, I didn't do it, I was just eating a bao bun. And the king, William, just looked at him with those cold, I'm too hot to have a bra and eyes and said, execute him. I was so angry my blood pressure spiked, my vision blurred, and, pop. I woke up to the sound of someone giggling. It wasn't a cute, I just saw a kitten, giggle. It was a, I just put salt in your coffee, kind of snicker. Look at him, a voice whispered. He's been sleeping for 3 hours. The king is arriving for the selection today, and this little pig is still dreaming of mud. I opened my eyes. I wasn't in my studio apartment. I was in a room that looked like a Pinterest board for Victorian royal core. 3 guys in silk robes were standing over me, looking like they stepped out of a shampoo commercial. Oh, the dummy is awake, said a guy with peacock feathers in his hair. This was Sasha, the side character bully who, if I recalled correctly, gets kicked out of the palace in Chapter 3 for stealing a silver spoon. I sat up, rubbing my head. Wait, my hands are tiny, and I smell like jasmine and peaches. Did you just call me a dummy? I asked, my voice coming out smooth and airy. Sasha blinked. The others froze. The old Leo would have tripped over his own feet and apologized for breathing their air. Well, yes, Sasha scoffed, regaining his ego. You're Leo, the fool of the Count's family. Your own father sent you here just so he wouldn't have to look at your face anymore. I looked in a nearby gold-rimmed mirror. Long silver hair, big violet eyes, and a face so innocent it looked like I'd never had a single thought in my life. Perfect. Well, Sasha, I said, hopping out of bed with a grin that didn't match my innocent face. At least my face is worth looking at. Your eyebrows, on the other hand, look like 2 caterpillars having a wrestling match. You might want to fix that before the king sees you. It's distracting. Sasha's jaw dropped. You, how dare, Leo, get dressed. An older servant, Hans, rushed in. The Alpha King William is in the courtyard. All concubine candidates must line up. Move, you slow-witted boy. The courtyard was filled with the most beautiful Omegas in the kingdom. And then there was Kuro. He stood at the front, looking like a literal angel. White robes, teary eyes, and a scent of fresh raw that probably required a chemical lab to produce. He was the protagonist's favorite, the one who eventually gets me killed. Oh, Leo, Kuro sighed as I took my spot at the very end of the line. He walked over, dabbing his non-existent tears with a lace handkerchief. I heard you tripped and hit your head this morning. Is your poor, tiny brain okay? The other candidates snickered. I leaned in close to his ear. My brain is fine, Kuro. But your acting, it's a bit 1 star. Maybe try less, dying swan, and more, actual human. Kuro stiffened, his eyes widening. Before he could retort, the trumpets sounded. His Majesty, King William. The Alpha King walked in, and I have to admit, the author didn't lie. He was terrifyingly handsome, sharp jawline, shoulders broad enough to build a house on, and an aura that screamed, I haven't felt an emotion since 2012. He walked down the line, dismissing Omegas with a single glance. Too loud, too boring, smells like cheap perfume. He stopped in front of Kuro. Kuro did a graceful bow, showing off his neck. Your Majesty, Kuro whispered, sounding like a dying flute. William paused. You'll do. Move to the inner palace. Kuro smirked at me over his shoulder. The villain wins round 1, I thought. Finally, William reached me. He looked at my file, then at my face. Leo, the foolish Omega of the Count, William muttered, his voice like gravel and velvet. Why are you looking at me like that? I realized I wasn't bowing. I was staring at him like he was a math problem I was about to solve. I'm just wondering, I said out loud. Wondering what? William's eyes narrowed. The courtyard went silent. No one spoke to the king like that. I'm wondering if you're actually as mean as you look, or if you just need a high-fiber diet to help with that permanent scowl. The sound of Hans the servant fainting in the background was the only noise for 5 solid seconds. William leaned down, his alpha scent, dark cedar and burnt amber, crashing over me like a wave. Most omegas would be shaking. I just raised an eyebrow. "You're the fool," William whispered. "You shouldn't even know what fiber is." "I have my moments," I winked. William stared at me for a long time. A small, almost invisible twitch appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Keep him," William ordered the guards. "I want to see how long it takes for him to say something even stupider." Success, I thought, as I was marched toward the palace. Step 1. Don't die. Step 2. Make the king realize he's an idiot. Step 3. Ruin Kuro's life. This is going to be fun. The inner palace was less like a royal residence and more like a high-stakes sorority house where everyone carried concealed daggers and smelled like expensive flowers. By the 3rd day, I had already been, accidentally, tripped twice, had, mistakenly, been served cold porridge, and someone, "I'm looking at you, Sasha," had replaced my face cream with industrial-strength mint paste. My skin felt like it was North Pole adjacent, but my pores had never been clearer. "Oh, Leo, you look so refreshed," Kuro chirped, fluttering his silk fan. We were gathered in the rose garden for the mandatory morning social, which was basically a chance for all the concubines to sit in a circle and insult each other's lineage. I sat down, crossing my legs in a way that definitely wasn't omega-like. I looked at Kuro's elaborate hairpiece, a gold bird that looked like it was struggling for its life. "Thanks, Kuro," I said, leaning back. "You look great, too. That bird on your head. Is it a phoenix? Or is it a golden chicken expressing its inner turmoil?" Very avant-garde. The table went silent. Lord Minsung, a dainty omega who took, delicate, to a competitive level, gasped into his tea. "Leo, how can you speak to the king's favorite like that? Have you no shame?" "Shame is a social construct designed to keep people from eating the last dumpling," I replied, grabbing a macaron. "And I really like dumplings." Suddenly, the heavy scent of cedar and "I own your mortgage" filled the air. King William appeared at the garden archway, looking like he'd just stepped off a dark romance book cover. His cape caught the wind perfectly. I'm convinced he has a servant following him with a fan just for the drama. "Your Majesty." Everyone scrambled to stand up and bow. Kuro practically did a gymnastic floor routine to end up in a graceful curtsy right in William's path. "Your Majesty, you've arrived just in time," Kuro said, his eyes instantly welling with tears. Leo was he was being so brave. He's struggling so much with his simple thoughts, he started hallucinating chickens. William's gaze slid over Kuro, who was doing his best, pouty lip, face, and landed on me. I was currently mid-bite, a piece of blue macaron stuck to my lip. "Hallucinating chickens, Leo?" William asked, his voice dropping an octave. He walked over, looming over me. I swallowed. "Technically, it was a gold-plated poultry commentary, sire. But if you want to talk about hallucinations, let's talk about why you're wearing that much leather in 80-degree weather. Are you okay? Are you sweating? Do you need a damp cloth?" The guards behind William actually choked. William just stared at me. He looked like he wanted to execute me and kiss me at the same time. The high IQ part of me knew he was intrigued because I wasn't boringly submissive. The Leo part of me just wanted to see if his abs were real or if it was a very expensive corset. "You have a big mouth for a fool," William muttered, reaching down. For a second, I thought he was going to strangle me. Instead, his thumb brushed the crumb off my lip. His touch was warm, and my omega instincts did a little backflip I wasn't prepared for. "I have a big brain, too," I whispered, "but let's keep that a secret. It might scare the others." William's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile, a real one, before he turned to Kuro. "Kuro, stop crying. The salt is bad for the roses." Kuro's face went from angel to demon in approximately 0.2 seconds. Later that evening, I was in my room trying to figure out how to invent indoor plumbing in this era when Kuro dropped by. He was accompanied by Sasha and a few other lackeys. "Leo, darling," Kuro said, his voice dripping with fake honey. "The king is hosting a private dinner tonight. He asked me to bring you this." He handed me a small, velvet box. Inside was a necklace featuring a massive, blood-red ruby. "It's the heart of the North," Sasha whispered, eyes wide with faux awe. The king only gives it to the one he intends to make queen. Red flag. Red flag. Giant, flaming red flag, my brain screamed. Oh, wow, I said, acting like the old Leo. So pretty. Like a big cherry. Yes, exactly. Kuro smirked. Wear it tonight. Don't tell anyone. It's a surprise for him. As soon as they left, I didn't put it on. I didn't even keep it in the box. I took the necklace, wrapped it in a dirty sock, and shoved it deep inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread I'd saved from dinner. 10 minutes later, the door kicked open. Guards. And behind them, a very distraught Kuro and a very furious King William. Your Majesty. I saw him take it. Kuro cried, clinging to William's arm. I saw Leo sneak into your private study and steal the heart of the North. I tried to stop him, but he hit me. Kuro pointed to a tiny, perfectly applied smudge of red makeup on his cheek. William looked at me, his face like stone. The air in the room grew heavy with his alpha command. Leo, did you steal the royal heirloom? Steal? I asked, looking confused. I stood up and started checking my pockets. I can't even find my other sock, William. Do you think I have the mental capacity to pull off a heist? Search the room, William barked. Kuro was smirking. He had clearly planted a second fake necklace or expected me to be wearing the one he gave me. The guards tossed my bed, emptied my drawers, and threw my clothes everywhere. Found it, a guard shouted. He pulled a velvet box out from under my pillow. Kuro gasped. Oh, Leo, how could you? William opened the box. His expression didn't change, but he held it up. This. Inside the box was a half-eaten chicken wing. The silence was deafening. That's my snack for later, I said, crossing my arms. It's very precious to me. But I don't think it's the heart of the North unless your kingdom is much more delicious than I thought. Kuro's eyes turned into saucers. But it was. I saw him. I walked up to Kuro, leaning in close. You saw me do what, Kuro? Put a chicken wing in a jewelry box. That's a weird hobby to spy on. I then turned to William. Your Majesty, I'm offended. You think I'd steal a ruby? Red isn't even my color. It clashes with the innocent fool vibe I've got going on. William looked from the chicken wing to Kuro's trembling form, then back to me. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing me. Where is the real necklace, Leo? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I'll tell you, I whispered, but only if you fire the person who does your hair. Those spikes are a safety hazard. William actually let out a short, sharp bark of laughter. It was the first time the palace had heard him laugh in years. Kuro looked like he was about to have a literal stroke. Everyone out, William ordered. Except Leo. The doors slammed shut with a thud that echoed through the marble hallways, leaving me alone with a king who looked like he was vibrating between, I should throw you in the dungeon, and, I want to know your skincare routine. William stood there, his arms crossed over that massive chest. The heart of the North, Ruby was still missing, Kuro was probably outside hyperventilating into a silk pillow, and I was standing next to a pile of tossed laundry holding a half-eaten chicken wing. The chicken wing, Leo. Really? William's voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. It was seasoned with rosemary and spike, Your Majesty. A delicacy, I said, casually tossing the wing back into the velvet box. I wiped my hands on a discarded tunic. Now, are we going to keep staring at each other until the moon goes down, or are you going to admit your favorite concubine is a pathological liar with the IQ of a lukewarm bowl of soup? William took a step forward, his alpha aura flaring. It was heavy, intoxicating, like the smell of a forest fire after the rain. Most Omegas would be on their knees by now, whimpering for mercy. I just leaned against the bedpost and checked my fingernails. You aren't a fool, William stated. It wasn't a question. The Leo the First knew couldn't count to 10 without using his toes. He certainly didn't know the word, pathological. People change, Will. Sometimes they hit their head, sometimes they realize being the palace doormat has terrible benefits, I shrugged. Besides, Will, sounds much friendlier, don't you think? It suits your softer side. The one you hide under all that stabbing. Do not call me, Will, he growled, though he didn't move to stop me. He stepped even closer, pinning me between his body and the bedpost. He was so tall I had to crane my neck. Where is the ruby? If it's found in this room, I have to execute you. It's the law. The law is a bit dramatic, don't you think? It's just a shiny rock. I sighed, reaching into the waistband of my silk trousers. William's eyes widened, his gaze dropping to my hands. What are you? I pulled out a crumpled, greasy paper napkin. Inside was the heart of the North. It sparkled brilliantly, mocking the dim candlelight. I didn't steal it, I said, holding it up by the chain. Kuro gave it to me as a gift from you. He told me to wear it as a surprise. I figured the surprise was me getting my head chopped off, so I decided to play a little game of hide and seek. The ruby stayed in my pocket. The chicken wing went in the box. A classic switcheroo. William took the necklace, his fingers brushing mine. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm. The mate bond trope of this novel was clearly working overtime. He tried to frame you for a capital crime, William muttered, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the jewel. And you just played with him. You weren't scared. William, I've had harder exams than Kuro's schemes, I laughed. He's predictable. He uses tears as a weapon because he thinks you're a sucker for a delicate omega. Are you a sucker? William leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I used to be. I thought a quiet omega was a safe one. But you're a migraine in silk robes. But I'm the most interesting migraine you've ever had, I whispered back, totally leaning into the tension. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A small, nervous head popped in. It was Min, the youngest kitchen servant and the only person who had been nice to me since I transmigrated. Lord Leo, I brought the extra gravy you asked for. Min froze, seeing the king looming over me in a very compromising position. Oh, SHESSH. I'm so sorry. I didn't see the king. I'm blind. I'm temporarily deaf. Min, stay, I called out, slipping under William's arm like a cat. The king was just leaving. He has to go tell Kuro that he's grounded. Or executed. Whatever the vibe is tonight. William turned, looking annoyed at the interruption. I am not leaving. We are not finished. Oh, we are, I said, taking the gravy boat from a trembling Min. I have a high IQ brain to feed. You have a kingdom to run. Also, you should probably check Kuro's room. I bet you'll find the second fake ruby he bought to discover on me just in case the first plan failed. He's thorough, I'll give him that. William looked at me with a mixture of fascination and genuine confusion. Who are you? I'm Leo, I said, taking a sip of the gravy. Don't judge me, it was cold. The new and improved version. 2.0. Now with 50% more sass and a functional prefrontal cortex. Get used to it, Will. Outside, in the hallway, Kuro was pacing like a caged tiger. Sasha was right beside him, fanning him frantically. He's still in there. Kuro hissed, his beautiful face contorted with rage. Why hasn't the king dragged him out by his hair? I put the ruby in the box. I saw it. Maybe the king is torturing him. Sasha suggested hopefully. Just then, the door opened. William stepped out. He looked perfectly composed, but he was holding the heart of the North. Your Majesty, Kuro cried, instantly switching back to fragile mode. You found it. Oh, the wicked boy. Shall I call the executioner? William looked down at Kuro as if he were a particularly persistent bug. The ruby was in Leo's possession because you gave it to him, Kuro. Kuro's breath hitched. I don't know what you mean. He must have lied. Leo doesn't lie, William said, and I actually cheered a little from inside the room. He's too busy being the most interesting migraine I've ever met. Kuro, you are confined to the East Wing. If I see you near the Rose Garden, or Leo, for the next month, I'll have you sent back to your father's estate in a vegetable cart. A vegetable cart? Kuro shrieked, his voice hitting a frequency that probably shattered glass in the next county. As they were marched away, I poked my head out the door. Hey Kuro, I shouted. Kuro turned, his eyes bloodshot with fury. Try the cabbage, I yelled with a grin. It's great for the complexion. William glanced back at me, shook his head, and walked away. But I saw it. The corner of his mouth definitely twitched. I went back inside and sat on my bed. One villain down, about 20 more to go. And a king who is starting to look less like a walnut, and more like a snack. The palace was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Kuro, desperate to regain his top concubine, status after the Ruby disaster, had decided to go full on cliché. He had procured a vial of Midnight Ember, a potent alpha aphrodisiac that supposedly makes a man see his soulmate in whoever is standing closest. Too bad for Kuro, I have a nose for chemistry and a very low tolerance for nonsense. I was in the kitchen helping Min reorganize the spice rack, because apparently, high IQ Leo can't stand disorganized cumin, when I saw Kuro's personal maid, Sarah, acting suspicious near the king's evening wine decanter. Min, I whispered, pointing with a cinnamon stick. Do you see that? She's shaking more than a leaf in a hurricane. That's the, I'm poisoning the monarch, look. Min gasped. Should we stop her? No, I smirked, adjusted my silk robes. I have a better idea. Let's just redirect the traffic. 5 minutes later, the king's wine was served. Kuro was waiting in his finest, most transparent silk nightgown in the West Garden, posing under a willow tree like he was auditioning for a perfume ad. The plan was simple. William drinks, William gets hot, William sees Kuro, and boom, scandalous night ensues. But William, being the stubborn walnut I've come to appreciate, didn't drink his wine in the dining hall. He took the decanter back to his study, which, purely by architectural coincidence, is right next to my room. I was sitting on my bed, reading a boring book on kingdom economics, and mentally correcting the interest rates when my door didn't just open, it erupted. William stood there. His tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were glowing a shade of amber that basically said, I am a predator and you look like a very tasty snack. Leo, he growled. The scent of cedar and burnt amber was so thick I could practically taste it. Whoa, Will, you look like you've been microwaved, I said, standing up. I walked over to him, sniffing the air. Yep, Midnight Ember. Smells like cheap lust and desperation. Kuro really outdid himself. William lunged forward, grabbing my waist and pinning me against the door. His breath was hot against my neck. I can't, stay away. My head is spinning. That's the drug, big guy, I said, trying to stay professional even though my heart was doing the Macarena. You should probably jump in a cold fountain. Or eat a lemon. I don't want a lemon, William hissed, burying his face in the crook of my neck. He took a deep, shaky breath of my peach and jasmine scent. I want you. I've wanted to shut that smart mouth of yours since the moment you insulted my hair. Wait, really? I blinked. That's your kink. Intellectual verbal abuse. We could have saved so much time. He didn't give me time to finish my sentence. He kissed me, and it wasn't a king-like, dignified kiss. It was hungry, desperate, and surprisingly sweet. William, I gasped as he lifted me off my feet like I weighed nothing. If we do this, you're going to have a massive hangover tomorrow. And I'm going to remind you of everything you said while you were high on Kuro's juice. Worth it, he muttered, dropping me onto the silk sheets. The night was, well, let's just say the author of this novel really knew how to write a passionate alpha. But even in the heat of it, my brain wouldn't shut up. You know, I panted, as he bit softly at my shoulder, the chemical structure of this aphrodisiac is actually quite fascinating. It targets the amygdala while, oh. Okay, never mind the science. Do that again. Leo, William groaned, pinning my wrists above my head. Shut up. For once in your life, just stop talking. Make me, I challenged, smirking. He did. Frequently. The sun rose, hitting me right in the eyes. I felt like I'd been hit by a carriage, but a very expensive carriage. Next to me, William was stirring, groaning as the midnight ember wore off and the giant alpha headache set in. My head, he croaked, clutching his temples. I told you. Rosemary tea and a lobotomy are the only cures, I said, sitting up and wrapping a sheet around myself. I looked like a disaster, but a victorious one. Suddenly, the door burst open. Again. It was Kuro, followed by a troop of guards and Sasha. Kuro was wearing a devastated expression, clutching a silk handkerchief. Your Majesty, I have been searching for you all night. I heard noises from this room, horrible, scandalous noises. I was so worried Leo had kidnapped you. Kuro shrieked. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the scene. William, shirtless and looking like a Greek god with a migraine, was sitting in my bed. I was casually eating a grape I found on the nightstand. Oh, hey guys, I waved. You're early. The king and I were just discussing the national budget. It was very taxing. Lots of physical labor involved. Kuro's face went a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. But, the wine. You were supposed to come to the garden. I was the one who. You were the one who what, Kuro? William asked, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. He stood up, and even with a headache, his alpha presence made the guards take 3 steps back. You were the one who drugged my wine. No. I mean, I was protecting you. Kuro stammered, his eyes darting to Sasha, who was busy trying to melt into the wallpaper. You drugged the king, I said, standing up making sure my sheet was secure. I'm a genius, not a nudist. And since I'm the fool, I'll explain it simply, that's treason. Like, the losing your head kind of treason. Kuro fell to his knees. Your Majesty, I did it for love. Leo is a snake. He intercepted you. He stole the night that belonged to me. Actually, I chimed in, you stole the night. I just provided the venue. And the conversation. And apparently, the stress relief. William looked at Kuro with pure disgust. Guards, take him to the dampest, smelliest cell in the North Tower. I'll deal with his execution, or exile, once my head stops pounding. Wait, Kuro yelled as he was dragged away. I'm pregnant. I feel it. I had a vision. You can't kill the mother of your heir. The room went dead silent. I looked at William. William looked at me. I looked back at Kuro. Kuro, we've been here for 10 minutes. The drug wore off 4 minutes ago. Biology doesn't work that fast, even in a trashy romance novel. You aren't pregnant, you're just bloated from all that spite. I'll frame you for this, Leo. Kuro screamed as the door shut. I'll make you pay. William sighed, sinking back onto the bed. He looked at me, a soft, weary smile touching his lips. He's never going to stop, is he? Probably not, I said, crawling back over to him and handing him a glass of water. But don't worry. I've got a high IQ, a sharp tongue, and apparently, the king in my bed. I think I can handle a fake pregnancy plot. William pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. You're an insufferable brat. But I'm your insufferable brat, I teased. Now, tell me more about that, shutting me up, thing from last night. I think I forgot the details. The palace went from execution ground to baby shower in record time. It was enough to give me whiplash. 1 minute, Kuro was being dragged to the North Tower, and the next, he was being carried back on a gilded litter because the royal healer, a man named Elder Oren, who looked like he'd been mummified while still alive, had declared the impossible. It is a miracle of the stars. Elder Oren proclaimed in the Great Hall, his voice shaking with ancient drama. Lord Kuro is indeed with child. The Alpha King's lineage is secured. I stood by the pillar, munching on a dried apricot. A miracle, I muttered to myself. In biology, we call that a statistical anomaly, or a bold-faced lie. William was sitting on his throne, looking like he wanted to fight a dragon just to get out of the conversation. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for help. Your Majesty, Kuro purred, draped in 3 layers of white silk and resting a hand on his perfectly flat stomach. I know you were heavily intoxicated 3 weeks ago, the night before the selection. You came to my chambers in a daze. You don't remember, but my body remembers. The Council of Elders, a group of 5 grumpy old men who lived for tradition and fiber supplements, nodded in unison. The king was seen entering the West Wing that night. Elder Bastian barked, glaring at me. It is settled. Lord Kuro shall be moved to the Empress suite. He carries the future of the North. Wait a minute, I stepped forward, my high IQ siren blaring in my head. William, were you that drunk? Because usually, when someone is that drunk, they're more likely to vomit on a shoe than produce an heir. William rubbed his temples. I remember drinking with the generals. I remember the hallway, and then nothing until the next morning. I woke up in my own bed. Exactly. Kuro cried, dabbing his eyes. You left me in the middle of the night to protect my reputation. How noble. I looked at Kuro. He looked smug. Too smug. My nose caught his scent. It was still fresh rain, but there was an undertone of something metallic. Something that wasn't William Cedarwood. Weeks passed, and Kuro became a nightmare. He demanded strawberries in the middle of a snowstorm. He demanded the guards bow to his stomach. He even tried to have my room turned into a nursery for his future child's toys. I was sitting in the library, researching omega gestation periods and how to expose a fraud without getting beheaded, when Sasha walked in, carrying Kuro's shopping bags. "Oh, look, it's the favorite who got demoted to the guy who lives near the king," Sasha sneered. "Kuro says when the baby is born, you'll be his personal footstool." "Sasha," I said, not looking up from my book. "If you don't stop talking, I'm going to calculate the exact trajectory needed to throw this heavy encyclopedia at your head. It's physics. You wouldn't understand." Sasha huffed and left, but as I stood up to put the book away, the world tilted. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grab the shelf. My stomach did a somersault, and suddenly, the smell of the old parchment in the library, which I usually loved, smelled like rotting garbage. "Oh no," I whispered, leaning my head against the cool wood. No, no, no. I'm a genius. I use logic. Logic says that one night with William was statistically significant. The next morning, the entire court was gathered for the blessing ceremony. Kuro was sitting on a literal pedestal, eating grapes. "I feel so faint," Kuro sighed loudly, looking at William. "The little prince is demanding so much energy. Your Majesty, shouldn't Leo be serving me? It's good practice for his future role as a servant." William looked ready to snap a pencil. "Leo is not a servant, Kuro." "He is." "I'm currently about to throw up," I interrupted, walking into the room. I looked pale, my silver hair a bit messy. Kuro laughed. "Oh, look. The fool is jealous. He's trying to pretend he's sick to get attention. How pathetic." "It's not jealousy, Kuro," I said, grabbing a piece of bread from a tray to settle my stomach. "It's called sympathy pains. Or, more likely, it's called, the king's actual child is currently making me hate the smell of your perfume." The room went silent. William stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Leo." William breathed, his voice a mix of terror and hope. "I need a doctor," I said, pointing at Elder Oren. "But not that one. He's old and his eyes are failing. I want the independent medic from the town, and I want him to check both of us." Kuro's face went white. I am the king's priority. You can't suggest I'm lying." "I'm not suggesting you're lying about being pregnant, Kuro," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy tone. I walked right up to his pedestal. "I think you are pregnant. I just think the father isn't wearing a crown. I think the father is someone who smells like, oh, I don't know, the metallic oil they use on the practice swords in the guards' barracks." I caught a glimpse of a guard in the back, Captain Jackson, who suddenly looked very interested in his own boots. You fool," Kuro screamed. "Elders, protect the air." "Enough," William roared. The alpha pressure was so intense the plates on the table rattled. He walked down to me, his hand hovering over my waist, not yet daring to touch. "Leo, are you sure?" "William, I can calculate the square root of 1.4 million in my head," I said, looking him in the eye. "I know my own body. Something is growing in here, and unlike Kuro's miracle, mine doesn't involve a convenient memory blackout." "We will have the exam," William declared, his eyes burning with a fire that made the elders shrink. "Both of them. If Leo is lying, he will be confined. If Kuro is lying." William didn't finish the sentence, but the way he looked at the North Tower said enough. I felt another wave of nausea and leaned into William's side. He immediately wrapped his arm around me, anchoring me. "You okay?" he whispered. "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just remind me to invent ginger ale after this. Being an omega is 0/10, would not recommend to a friend." Kuro let out a sob, but for the first time, no one moved to comfort him. The game was changing, and the fool was finally holding all the cards. The great hall was packed. It felt less like a royal palace and more like the season finale of a reality TV show. In one corner, Kuro was clutching his stomach, weeping about royal stress. In the center, a neutral medic from the neutral territories, Drive Aris, was setting up his instruments. "This is an insult," Elder Bastian shouted, his white beard wagging. "To doubt a pregnant omega is to doubt the heavens." "Oh, hush, Bastian," I snapped, sitting on a velvet chair and sipping a cup of ginger root tea I'd forced the cook to make. "The heavens are fine. It's the math that's bothering me. Dr. Aris, if you please. Examine the miracle first." Kuro was forced onto the examination bench. Dr. Aris, a no-nonsense beta, performed a series of checks. He used a mana stone, a device that glows based on the alpha signature of the sire. He pressed the stone to Kuro's belly. It glowed a dull, muddy brown. The room went silent. That's strange, I said, leaning forward. William's alpha scent is cedar and amber. That usually glows bright gold. Brown is, what is brown, doctor? Doctor. Aris adjusted his glasses. Brown is the signature of a commoner alpha. Usually someone who works with iron or weaponry. I turned my head slowly toward the back of the room. Captain Jackson, you've been very quiet. Do you have a favorite color? Is it brown? The captain of the guard turned so pale he looked like he'd been bleached. Kuro shrieked, the stone is broken. It's a trick by the fool. Now, check me, I said, standing up and pulling my robe tight over my slightly bloated stomach. Doctor. Aris moved the stone to me. The moment it touched my skin, the room was blinded by a radiant, shimmering gold. It was so bright it cast shadows of the elders against the walls. It smelled faintly of cedar and jasmine. William gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. Leo. Well, I said, looking at the elders. Unless William has been moonlighting as a blacksmith, I think we have a winner. Kuro, care to explain why your prince is actually a junior guard? Kuro collapsed, his face a mask of horror. William, I was lonely. You never looked at me. Jackson listened to me. And apparently did more than listen, I remarked. Take them away. And someone get me a pickle. This drama is making me hungry. With the truth revealed, Kuro and Jackson were exiled to a distant farm where I heard Kuro has to actually work for a living, the true punishment. The elders were forced to write a formal apology to me on parchment made of the finest vellum, which I used to make paper airplanes. William, however, was a changed man. He followed me everywhere. If I tripped on a rug, he wanted to execute the rug. If I coughed, he summoned 3 doctors. Will, stop, I said one afternoon in the garden, 9 months later. I was now roughly the size of a small planet. I am a high IQ genius. I can navigate a hallway without a royal escort. You are carrying the future of this kingdom, Leo, William said, his voice soft as he rubbed my back. And, you're carrying my heart. I was so stupid. I almost lost you because I believed the lies of everyone else. To be fair, I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, I was pretending to be a fool. I'm just very good at acting. But from now on, no more secrets. Except for where I hid your favorite dagger. You were getting too stabby with it. William laughed, kissing my forehead. I love you, you insufferable, brilliant man. The birth was, in a word, loud. I believe I told William that if he touched me again in the next 50 years, I would dismantle his throne with a spoon. But then, the crying started. 2 distinct voices. Twins, drive, Aris announced, looking exhausted. An alpha and an omega. A few hours later, the palace was quiet. I was propped up on silk pillows, holding 2 bundles of joy. William was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at them with more wonder than he'd ever shown his entire kingdom. Look at them, William whispered. The first baby, the alpha, had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, permanent scowl. He looked exactly like a miniature William. We named him Liam. The second baby, the omega, had silver hair and big, bright violet eyes. He wasn't crying, he was staring at a shiny spoon on the bedside table with intense, analytical focus. He looked exactly like me. We named him Lucian. Liam is already trying to command the room, I noted, watching the dark-haired baby grip William's finger with surprising strength. And Lucian is definitely trying to figure out the structural integrity of that spoon. We're in trouble, Will. We have a genius for a consort and a king for a father, William said, leaning in to kiss me, then the babies. I think the kingdom can handle a little trouble. I looked out the window at the North Star, thinking back to the moment I died in my old world. I had cursed the book, hated the king, and pitied the fool. Now, I was the one writing the ending. You know, I said, as Lucian successfully grabbed the spoon and looked at me with a triumphant, goo. I think I like this version of the story much better. Me too, William whispered. And for the first time in the history of the North, the king didn't look like a walnut, he just looked like a man in love.
Next. There another similar story, I hope you like it.
Look at him, Alex sneered, his voice loud enough to carry across the silenced room. He gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist. The high alpha protector. My father actually thought a servant's blood could be upgraded just by pinning a title on him. You're still just a dog, aren't you, Will? The crystal chandeliers of the Sterling estate dimmed in comparison to the heat of the humiliation radiating through the grand ballroom. It was the night of the autumn gala, and Alex von Sterling, the crown jewel of the nobility and a rare, high-grade Omega, stood at the center of a mocking circle. At his feet, William knelt, picking up the shards of a shattered champagne flute. His movements were methodical, his face a mask of practiced stoicism. Look at him, Alex sneered, his voice loud enough to carry across the silenced room. He gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist. The high alpha protector. My father actually thought a servant's blood could be upgraded just by pinning a title on him. You're still just a dog, aren't you, Will? One of Alex's friends, a sneering heir named Julian, kicked William's hand as he reached for a piece of glass. A dog with a 90% compatibility rate. You're lucky, Alex. Most Omegas have to settle for someone with a personality, you just get a loyal mute. William didn't flinch, even as the glass sliced his palm. A thin trail of crimson dripped onto the white marble. The scent of his pheromones, usually a grounding, deep cedarwood, was suppressed so tightly it felt like a vacuum in the air. As William stared at the blood on the floor, his mind traitorously drifted. He remembered a time, 10 years ago, when those same hands of Alex's weren't pointed in mockery, but were wrapped around William's neck in a breathless hug. Will, look, I found a secret passage in the library. A younger, sun-kissed Alex had laughed, dragging William through the dust. When I grow up, I'm going to make you my head knight. We'll be together forever, okay? Promise. They had been inseparable. William was the servant's son, but Alex had treated him like his own soul. That was before the secondary gender presentation. The moment the doctors announced Alex was an Omega and William was an Alpha with a near-perfect biological match, the friendship died. To Alex, the engagement wasn't a union of hearts, it was a cage built by biology. He saw William not as his best friend, but as the living reminder that he wasn't free. Answer me when I'm talking to you, Alex snapped, his voice trembling with a strange, frantic energy. He was frustrated. No matter how much he pushed, William never pushed back. Or has the servant side of you finally swallowed the alpha side? You're pathetic. I'd rather mate with a stray than someone as spineless as you. William looked up then. His dark eyes, usually filled with a soft, aching devotion, were cold. Not angry, just empty. Is that truly what you want, Alexander? William asked. His voice was calm, devoid of the young master honorific he usually maintained. The use of his full name made Alex flinch. Don't use that tone with me. You're supposed to be grateful. You're a commoner who crawled into a noble bed because of your scent glands. I never asked for the engagement, William said softly, standing up. He ignored the blood dripping from his hand, ruining his pristine white gloves. I accepted it because I thought that if I stayed by your side, I could protect you from the people who actually see you as a prize. I thought I was the only one who saw you. I don't need protection from a servant. Alex yelled, his pheromones flaring into a sharp, bitter citrus scent that signaled his distress. William looked around the room, at the friends who bullied him for Alex's amusement, at the noble family that looked at him like a tool, and finally at the boy he had loved since they were 5 years old. You've postponed our wedding 6 times, William said. You've told the world I'm a dog. You've let these people spit on me. And I let you do it, because I thought it was your way of grieving the friendship we lost. William reached into his breast pocket and pulled out the sterling signet ring, the symbol of their engagement. But I realized something tonight, looking at you, William continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a thunderclap. The Alex I loved died the day we presented. You're just a stranger who looks like him. The room went deathly silent as William placed the blood-stained ring on a passing waiter's tray. I, William Thorne, formally renounce the engagement to the House of Sterling, he announced, his alpha aura finally leaking out, not in an attack, but in a massive, suffocating wave of finality. I will sign the papers by morning. You're free, Alex. You don't have to hate me anymore, because I won't be there to see it. William turned on his heel and walked toward the grand doors. Wait, Will. Alex took a step forward, his face suddenly pale. The freedom he had screamed for suddenly felt like a cold, dark abyss. You can't just leave. My father will. William didn't look back. Your father can find another 90% match. I'm done being your punching bag. As the heavy oak doors slammed shut behind him, the silence in the ballroom was deafening. For the first time in years, Alex was the center of attention without his shadow standing behind him, and suddenly, he felt like he couldn't breathe. The heavy doors of the Duke's private study slammed shut, the echo ringing through the marble hallway like a gavel. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and the suffocating tension of a crumbling dynasty. Duke Sterling sat behind his mahogany desk, his face pale, staring at the blood-stained signet ring sitting on a bed of velvet. Beside him, the Duchess was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her expression one of sheer panic. William, let's be reasonable, the Duke began, his voice uncharacteristically strained. He's spirited. He's a young Omega who was thrust into a position of immense power and biological expectation. He's just a child playing at being cruel. He is 21, Your Grace, William replied, standing as straight as a soldier. He had already changed out of his livery into a plain, dark traveling coat. At 21, I was shielding him from the press and taking his punishments from the tutors. At 21, he should know the weight of a man's dignity. He loves you, William. He truly does. The Duchess cried out, reaching forward to grab William's sleeve. He's just confused. This 90% match, it scared him. He felt like his heart didn't have a choice, so he rebelled. If you leave, his pheromones will go into chaos. You know what happens to an Omega who loses a high compatibility match. William gently but firmly dislodged her hand. His distress is no longer my burden to carry. For 3 years, I have been his shadow, his footstool, and his punching bag. I stayed because I loved him. But tonight, I looked into his eyes while he called me a dog, in front of the entire nobility, and I realized, there is nothing left of the boy I grew up with. It's a phase. The Duke barked, slamming his fist on the desk. We will discipline him. We will force him to apologize publicly. An apology born of force is just another lie, Your Grace, William said calmly. I have already signed the dissolution papers. My father's debt to this house was paid off years ago through my service. I am a free alpha, and I am exercising my right to walk away. Outside the study, Alex was pacing the hallway. He wasn't crying, he was fuming. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, rhythmic drumming he told himself was just adrenaline. He's bluffing, Alex thought, gripping his own elbows. William doesn't leave. William stays. He's just doing this to make me feel guilty because I pushed him a little too hard tonight. He wants me to beg. That's it. He's playing hard to get. When the study doors opened, William stepped out. He didn't look at Alex. He didn't even pause. Will, stop right there, Alex commanded, throwing his young master persona around like a cloak. William stopped, but he didn't turn around. Is this the part where you wait for me to say sorry? Alex laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Fine, you're sensitive. I get it. The dog comment was a bit much. Now, go put your ring back on and tell my father you were just tired. We have the hunting trip next week, and I need you to handle the horses. William finally turned. The look in his eyes made the words die in Alex's throat. There was no warmth, no hidden longing, no simmering hurt. Just silence. I'm not going to the hunting trip, Alex, William said. I'm going to the Northern Territories. I've accepted a commission in the Border Guard. Alex's stomach dropped. The border? That's weeks away. You're being dramatic. How long are you going to keep up this act? 1 day. 2. You'll be back the second your rut hits and you realize no one else matches your scent. That's the difference between us, William said, taking a step closer. For the first time, he let his alpha pheromones settle, not as a threat, but as a goodbye. The cedarwood scent was faint, fading. I would have stayed even if we were a 0% match. But you couldn't even respect me at 90%. You're obsessed with me, William. You've been following me since we were kids. Alex shouted, his voice cracking. You can't just turn that off. You're trying to punish me by making me miss you, but it won't work. William reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wooden bird, a clumsy carving Alex had made for him when they were 7 years old. William had carried it every day for 14 years. He placed the wooden bird on the side table next to Alex. "I'm not trying to make you miss me, Alex," William said softly. "I'm trying to forget you exist. There's a difference." William walked past him, his shoulder brushing Alex's. Usually, that contact would send a spark of electricity through them both. This time, William felt like stone. "William," Alex yelled at his back. "If you walk out that door, don't you dare come back. I'll have the engagement officially struck from the records. You'll be nobody. Do you hear me? A nobody." William didn't stop. He didn't look back. He walked down the grand staircase, through the foyer, and out into the rain, leaving the heavy scent of bitter citrus and dying hope behind him. Alex stood at the top of the stairs, trembling. He waited for the front door to open again. He waited for William to realize he had gone too far and come back to apologize for the scare. 5 minutes passed. 10. "He's just playing hard to get," Alex whispered to the empty hallway, his hand clutching the front of his shirt where his heart was beginning to ache with a physical, agonizing throb. "He'll be back by breakfast. He has nowhere else to go." But for the first time in his life, the young master of Sterling was completely alone. The golden cage of the Sterling estate had never felt colder. 6 months had passed since the night the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind William Thorne, and for Alex von Sterling, the world had turned into a grayscale nightmare of biological agony and social ruin. Alex sat huddled in his darkened bedroom, the curtains drawn tight. His skin felt like it was humming with a low-grade fever that never broke. This was the reality of a 90% compatibility crash. When a high-grade omega is suddenly severed from their fated alpha, the body doesn't just grieve, it revolts. His scent, once a vibrant, sparkling citrus, had turned sour and thin, like rotting fruit. Without William's grounding cedarwood pheromones to balance him, Alex's cycles were chaotic. He suffered through phantom heats, sudden bursts of agonizing warmth and longing that left him clawing at his silk sheets, crying out a name that no longer answered. "William," he whispered into the dark, his voice rasping. He reached for the bedside table, hoping to find a glass of water, but his hand hit empty air. Usually, William would have been there before Alex even realized he was thirsty. William would have known the exact temperature he liked, the exact way to brush the hair off his forehead to soothe the migraine. Now, there was only a rotating door of nervous servants who flinched every time Alex snapped at them. Outside the bedroom walls, the nobility was less than kind. The sterling jewel had lost its luster. At the few galas Alex had forced himself to attend, the whispers were like needles. "Did you hear? The Thorne boy didn't just leave, he renounced the bond. Imagine being so insufferable that a commoner prefers the frozen border to your bed. I heard his compatibility has dropped. No other alpha can stand the scent of his distress. He's essentially damaged goods now." Even Julian, the friend who had helped Alex bully William, had stopped calling. Without William there to act as a punching bag, Alex wasn't fun anymore. He was just a bitter, sickly omega with a crumbling reputation. 2,000 miles away, the air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and fresh snow. William Thorne stood on the ramparts of the Ironwatch garrison. He looked different. The polished, submissive posture of a noble servant was gone, replaced by the rugged, broad-shouldered stance of a man who belonged to himself. His uniform was simple, heavy wool and reinforced leather, and his dark hair was cut shorter, windswept and messy. "Thorne, report," a voice barked. William turned, a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. "Perimeter is clear, Commander. The scouts returned 10 minutes ago. No sign of frost trolls in the valley. Good work. Get some stew in you, then hit the barracks. You've been on double watch for 3 days, the commander said, clapping a hand on William's shoulder. He paused, sniffing the air. Your scent is finally clearing up, son. That bitter edge is almost gone. You smell like real cedar again. William nodded. I feel lighter, sir. It was true. The first 3 months had been hell. His DNA had screamed for Alex, his alpha instincts demanding he return to protect his mate. But William had gritted his teeth and buried himself in work. He had saved a fellow soldier from a blizzard, he had led a successful supply run through dangerous territory. For the first time in his life, people looked at him and saw a leader, not a leash. As he walked toward the mess hall, a young female beta soldier, Clara, fell into step beside him. Hey, Will, she said, bumping his arm playfully. A few of us are heading to the village tavern tonight for the winter solstice. No noble drama, just cheap ale and bad music. You coming? William looked at her, at the easy, respectful friendship in her eyes. It was so different from the toxic, suffocating love he had chased for 20 years. Yeah, William said, his voice steady. I think I'd like that. Back at the Sterling estate, Alex's father entered his son's room, dropping a piece of parchment on the bed. The investigators found him, the Duke said, his voice cold. He's at the Iron Watch. He's been promoted to sergeant. He refused the summons to return, Alex. He sent this. With trembling hands, Alex tore open the letter. He expected a long explanation, perhaps a secret confession of lingering love. The paper contained only one sentence in William's firm, elegant script. I have found peace in the silence where your voice used to be. Please stop looking for me. Alex let out a choked, broken sob, clutching the paper to his chest. The 90% match meant he could feel the ghost of William's contentment through the distance, and it was the cruelest punishment of all. William wasn't playing hard to get. William was simply gone. The passage of 2 years had carved a new man out of the soul of William Thorne. No longer the quiet shadow in a servant's livery, he returned to the capital not as a subordinate but as Commander Thorne of the Northern Border Guard. His chest was broader, his skin bronzed by the harsh mountain sun, and his gaze held the steady, terrifying stillness of a man who had stared down death and didn't blink. He hadn't returned for the Sterlings. He had returned to receive his official commission from the king himself, a title of nobility earned through blood, not biology. News of William's return rippled through the high society like a tidal wave. In the Sterling manor, Alex sat by a window, his once vibrant blonde hair dull, his frame thin from years of compatibility sickness. He's back, Alex gasped, his heart leaping with a painful, frantic hope. Fetch the carriage. I need to go to the barracks immediately. He'll want to see me first. He's probably just waiting for me to acknowledge his new rank. But when Alex arrived at the military headquarters, he was stopped at the gate by 2 guards with crossed halberds. I am Alexander von Sterling. Alex snapped, his voice trembling. Let me through. I am here to see Commander Thorne. The commander is in a briefing with the Ministry of War, my lord, the guard said, his voice devoid of the usual noble fawning. He has a strict, no visitor, policy for civilians. If you wish to see him, you must file a formal request at the Chancellery. The current wait time is 3 weeks. Alex stood frozen. 3 weeks. William used to wait 3 hours in the rain just to hold Alex's umbrella. The realization hit him like a physical blow. William hadn't just moved on. He had built a fortress around his life that Alex no longer had the key to. A few days later, William walked through the capital's lower market. He wore a simple civilian cloak, but his authoritative stride made the crowds part instinctively. He wasn't there for luxury, he was there to observe the city he once called home. His feet stalled near the slave auctions, a place he usually detested. Step up, a greasy merchant bellowed, hauling a chain. A high-grade Omega. Strong, resilient, but a bit of a firebrand. He's been through 4 houses in 2 years. They say he's unbreakable. Who wants to try their hand at taming this one? On the raised platform stood a young man, perhaps 19. His name was Leo. His clothes were rags, and his face was bruised, a dark purple hematoma blooming over his cheekbone. But it was his eyes that stopped William in his tracks. They weren't broken. They were burning with a cold, silent rage that William recognized instantly. It was the same look William used to hide behind his loyal servant mask when Alex would mock him in public. It was the look of a soul being crushed by a world that saw them as an object. He's useless. A nobleman in the crowd laughed. I heard he bit the Earl of Essex's hand so hard he needed stitches. Just send him to the mines. 500 gold, William's voice rang out, calm and heavy. The crowd fell silent. The merchant's eyes widened. Commander Thorne. Certainly. He's yours. When they arrived at William's new, modest estate on the edge of the city, Leo remained tense, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting toward the heavy silver poker by the fireplace. Go ahead, Leo spat, his voice raspy. Get it over with. You bought the unbreakable one. You want to see me crawl. You want to see if a commander can succeed where the earls failed. William didn't move toward him. Instead, He sat at his desk and began unlacing his boots. The bathroom is through that door. There are clean clothes on the bed. They might be a bit large, but they're warm. Leo froze, his brow furrowed in suspicion. What's the catch? You want me to wash before you? I want you to wash because you smell like a gutter and you have open wounds that will fester, William said, looking up. His gaze was firm but lacked any flicker of lust. I didn't buy a plaything, Leo. I bought a man who looked like he was tired of standing on that stage. I don't submit, Leo hissed, clutching his bruised ribs. I'll kill you in your sleep before I let an alpha mark me. William stood up, walking slowly toward the boy. Leo flinched, bracing for a strike. Instead, William reached out and placed a hand, not on Leo's neck, but on his shoulder. I was a servant for 20 years, Leo, William said softly. I know what it's like to have your worth measured by someone else's whim. In this house, there are no masters. There is only me, and now, there is you. You're free to leave when your wounds heal, or you can stay and work for a wage. The choice is yours for the first time in your life. Leo stared at him, his eyes filling with a sudden, overwhelming moisture. He tried desperately to blink away. You're lying. All alphas lie. Then stay long enough to prove me wrong, William replied. Weeks later, William was walking through the central plaza with Leo. The boy looked transformed, his bruises had healed, he was wearing a fine linen shirt, and he walked half a step behind William, not out of fear, but out of a fierce, newfound loyalty. Suddenly, a carriage emblazoned with the sterling crest screeched to a halt. Alex tumbled out, his eyes wide and bloodshot. William, please. William stopped, his expression cooling into a mask of professional courtesy. Lord Sterling, you shouldn't be out in this weather. Your scent is unstable. I don't care about my scent. Alex cried, rushing toward him, ignoring the stares of the commoners. He reached for William's hand, but Leo stepped forward, his eyes flashing a warning. Stay back, Leo said, his voice low and protective. Alex looked at the young Omega, this stranger who stood so close to William, who smelled faintly of the same cedarwood soap William used. The jealousy that hit Alex was visceral, a physical pang in his gut. Who is this? Alex demanded, his voice trembling. William, who is this boy? Is this why you won't see me? You replaced me with a common slave. William placed a hand on Leo's arm, signaling him to stand down. He looked at Alex, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a dull, distant pity. This is Leo, William said. And he isn't a replacement, Alex. You have to be something to someone before you can be replaced. You chose to be a stranger to me a long time ago. I was a child. Alex sobbed, the drama of his heartbreak drawing a crowd. I didn't know. I love you, William. I've always loved you. The match, the 90%, it's killing me without you. The match is biological, Alex, William said, his voice echoing in the square. But love is a choice. You chose to hurt me for years. I am finally choosing to be happy. Please, go home. As William turned to walk away, Leo glanced back at the sobbing noble heir. For a moment, their eyes met, the boy who had nothing but had found a home, and the boy who had everything but was now truly destitute. The walls of William's new estate were thick and sturdy, built of gray stone that muffled the noise of the capital. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile hallways of the Sterling Manor. It smelled of home, of beeswax, old books, and the faint, comforting scent of cedarwood that clung to everything William touched. Over the last month, Leo had begun to bloom. The hollows of his cheeks had filled out, and the wary, feral glint in his eyes had softened into something warmer. He had fallen into a rhythm with William, not as a servant but as a companion. William treated him with a gentleness that Leo had never known existed in an alpha. He bought Leo books, taught him how to tend the garden, and on nights when Leo's past nightmares woke him screaming, William would sit by his door, talking quietly until the boy fell back to sleep. You don't have to do this, William, Leo had whispered one evening as William applied a soothing salve to the fading scars on Leo's wrists. I do it because I want to, William had replied, his voice a low rumble. You've spent your life being handled like a tool. I want you to know what it feels like to be cared for as a person. Leo had looked at the man who had quite literally bought his freedom and felt his heart swell with a devotion that was far more powerful than any biological match. One Tuesday afternoon, William was at the royal palace finalizing his military budget. Leo was in the sun-drenched library, organizing a stack of maps, when the front door clicked open. Leo frowned. William wasn't expected back for hours. "William, did you forget your—" He stopped. Standing in the doorway wasn't the broad-shouldered commander. It was a pale, disheveled man in expensive silks that hung loosely off his thin frame. Alex von Sterling looked like a ghost of high society. His eyes were sunken, and his scent was a jagged, bitter streak of sour lemon. Alex stared at Leo, his gaze raking over the boy's clean clothes and the healthy glow of his skin. The jealousy in the room was thick enough to choke on. "So," Alex spat, his voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and rage. "This is where the heroic commander keeps his little pet. I expected something more. You're just a common street rat." Leo didn't flinch. He slowly set the maps down on the mahogany desk. "And you must be the young master I've heard so much about. Though, you look much smaller than the stories suggested. How dare you?" Alex stepped into the room, his hand trembling as he pointed a finger at Leo. "Do you even know who I am? I am William's fated match. We are 90% compatible. Our blood is practically the same. And you're a slave he picked up off a dirty platform to spite me. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" Leo asked, his voice calm, almost pitying. "You're a whore," Alex hissed, stepping closer, his face contorting. "You're using your body to trap him while he's vulnerable. You think because he feeds you and gives you a bed that he loves you. He's an alpha. He's just using you to vent the frustration I caused him. Once he's bored of your common scent, he'll throw you back into the gutter where he found you." Alex expected Leo to cry. He expected him to cower, just as the servants at the Sterling estate did. But Leo wasn't a noble-born Omega raised on silken manners. He was a survivor of the pits. Leo laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of genuine disbelief. "You really don't get it, do you?" Leo walked toward Alex, not backing away an inch. Even though Alex was a high-grade noble, Leo's presence was far more imposing. "You talk about matches and blood, as if they mean something to a man like William. You think he's with me for my scent?" Leo leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "William doesn't even know what my compatibility rating is. He never asked. Because unlike you, he doesn't see people as numbers on a medical chart. He belongs to me." Alex screamed, his voice cracking. "I've known him since we were 5. He loved me before you were even born." "Did he?" Leo retorted, his eyes flashing. "From what I heard, you treated him like a dog. You watched your friends kick him. You insulted him in front of the whole kingdom. You spent years breaking his heart, piece by piece, thinking he'd never leave because he was just a servant." Leo circled Alex like a predator. "You didn't love William. You loved having a loyal shadow that you could spit on whenever you felt insecure. And now that the shadow has stepped into the sun, you're terrified because you realized you're nothing without him reflecting your glory." "Shut up," Alex sobbed, striking out with a weak hand. Leo caught his wrist mid-air with a grip of iron. "I might be an Omega, but I'm not your kind of Omega, Alex," Leo said, his voice cold as ice. "I've fought for every breath I've ever taken. You've had everything handed to you, and you still managed to throw away the only thing that mattered." Leo leaned closer, his eyes boring into Alex's. "William pampers me. He feeds me. He looks at me like I'm a human being. And do you know why? Because I respect him. I see the man he is, not the servant you wanted him to be. While you were busy postponing your wedding and humiliating him, I was learning how to survive. And now he's mine. Not because of a match, but because I'm the one who stays when the lights go out." Leo released Alex's wrist, pushing him back slightly. Alex stumbled, his knees hitting the plush rug. He looked up at Leo, at the boy who had stolen the life he thought was his birthright, and for the first time, the reality of his loss settled into his bones. "Get out of this house," Leo commanded. "Before I call the guards. And if you ever speak William's name with that mouth again, I'll show you exactly why the merchant called me unbreakable." Alex scrambled to his feet, tears streaming down his face. He didn't say another word. He fled the house, his expensive silks rustling as he ran, leaving behind the scent of a broken, sour lemon. When the front door slammed shut, Leo took a deep breath. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the confrontation. A moment later, the side door opened. William stood there, his coat over his arm. He had been standing in the hallway for the last 5 minutes. He had heard everything. William. Leo gasped, his bravado instantly melting. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to a noble like that. I probably caused trouble for you. William didn't let him finish. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled Leo into a crushing embrace. He tucked Leo's head under his chin, his scent of cedarwood exploding in a warm, protective wave that finally settled Leo's tremors. Don't ever apologize for defending this home, William whispered into Leo's hair, his voice thick with emotion. I've spent my whole life waiting for someone to stand up for me like that. Thank you, Leo. In that moment, the 90% match with Alex felt like a distant, fading memory. William didn't need a biological miracle. He had found something much rarer, a soul that chose him. The grand hall of the royal palace was ablaze with light, but all eyes were fixed on the man standing at the top of the staircase. Commander William Thorne, now officially titled Earl of the North, looked every bit the legend he had become. His dress uniform was midnight blue, pinned with medals of valor, but his expression was no longer the stoic mask of a soldier. He looked radiant. Beside him, his hand firmly tucked into William's arm, was Leo. The former slave wore ivory silks stitched with silver thread, his head held high. There was no collar around his neck, only a delicate silver chain with a pendant that matched the crest on William's signet ring. As they descended the stairs, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. In the corner of the room, Alex von Sterling stood gripped by his father's side. He looked hollow, a shadow of the young master he used to be. He watched as William stopped in the center of the ballroom, not to greet the king, but to turn to Leo and adjust the lapel of his coat with a tenderness that made the noble ladies gasp. Are you all right? William whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The scent of the crowd is heavy. We can leave early if it's too much. Leo smiled, a bright, genuine thing that transformed his face. I'm with you, William. I've never been safer. The king stepped forward, raising a glass. To the Earl of the North and his partner. May their union be as strong as the walls of the Iron Watch. The toast echoed through the hall. Alex felt the final thread of his connection to William snap. There was no hatred left in William's eyes when they briefly met Alex's, only the polite, distant recognition one gives to a passing stranger. William wasn't angry anymore, he was happy. And that was the ultimate finality. The wedding was held a month later, not in the stuffy Capitol Cathedral, but in a small, ancient chapel overlooking the northern cliffs. It was private, filled only with the soldiers William had led and the few true friends they had made. When it came time for the vows, William didn't read from a script. He took Leo's scarred hands in his own and looked into his eyes. I spent 20 years thinking that love was a debt I had to pay, William said, his voice deep and steady. I thought it was something I had to earn by being silent and useful. But then I found you, Leo. You taught me that love isn't a leash, it's a choice. You defended me when I didn't have the strength to defend myself. Today, I choose you. Not because of a match, and not because of fate. I choose you because you are my home. Leo's eyes brimmed with tears as he replied, I was a boy with no name and no future. You didn't just save my life, William, you gave me a soul. I promise to be the peace you find at the end of every day. As they kissed, the scent of cedarwood and fresh, mountain wildflowers swirled together, creating a new, unique harmony that no doctor could have predicted. It wasn't a 90% biological match, it was 100% soul. Their honeymoon was spent in a secluded cabin deep in the cedar forests William loved so much. There were no servants, no titles, and no ghosts of the past. One morning, the sun filtered through the trees, casting golden stripes across the large, fur-lined bed. William woke first, watching the peaceful rise and fall of Leo's chest. He reached out, tracing the line of Leo's jaw with his thumb. Leo stirred, a sleepy, content smile tugging at his lips. He rolled over into William's arms, burying his face in the crook of the alpha's neck. Good morning, my Earl, Leo teased, his voice husky with sleep. None of that here, William chuckled, pulling the quilt higher around them. Here, I'm just William. And you're just mine. William leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the spot behind Leo's ear where a mate's mark would soon sit, a mark Leo had begged for, wanting to be tied to William in every way possible. I made coffee, William whispered. And the fire is still warm. Stay, Leo murmured, his arms tightening around William's waist. The coffee can wait. The world can wait. I just want to stay like this for a little longer. William smiled, resting his forehead against Leo's. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to look over his shoulder. He didn't feel the weight of a young master's whims or the sting of an insult. He was loved, he was respected, and he was finally free. Forever, William promised, kissing Leo's brow. We have all the time in the world. The shadows of the Sterling estate were gone, replaced by the warm, golden light of a new life. William Thorne, the servant who became a hero, had finally found his heart, and he was never letting go. Side story of Alex. The silence of the Sterling estate was a different kind of noise now. It was heavy, like wet wool, pressing against Alex's eardrums until he felt he might scream just to break it. He sat in the library, the same one where he and William used to hide as children. He held a glass of expensive brandy, but he couldn't taste it. Since the 90% bond had soured, everything tasted like ash. Alex looked at the spot by the fireplace where William used to stand. Even when they were children, William had been there, always a step behind, always watching with those steady, soulful eyes. Will, look, I caught a butterfly. It's beautiful, young master. Shall we let it go so it can go home? Alex squeezed his eyes shut. Why had he been so cruel? He remembered the day of his presentation. The doctor had beamed, calling him a miracle for matching so perfectly with a household alpha. Alex had felt trapped. He had looked at William and felt a sudden, irrational spike of hatred. He didn't want a destiny. He didn't want to be told his heart belonged to the servant boy who washed his boots. So, he had decided to break William. If he couldn't control his biology, he would control William's spirit. He had pushed, mocked, and humiliated him, waiting for William to snap, to yell, to show some spark of the alpha dominance the doctors raved about. But William had only ever looked at him with that quiet, agonizing devotion. Until the night he didn't. He's never coming back, is he? Alex whispered to the empty room. He thought about the encounter in the market, the way William had looked at that slave boy, Leo. There had been a tenderness in William's eyes that Alex hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the look of a servant or a match. It was the look of a man who had found his equal. Alex stood up and walked to the mirror. He barely recognized the person staring back. His skin was sallow, his eyes haunted. He was a high noble Omega, but he was more of a prisoner than Leo had ever been. He was a prisoner of his own pride. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, wooden bird William had left behind months ago. The wood was smooth from where Alex had rubbed it obsessively every night. I was waiting for you to beg, Alex choked out, a sob finally breaking through his chest. I thought if I made you hurt enough, you'd have to stay. I didn't realize. I was the one who needed you. You were the only thing in this house that was real. A week later, Alex stood on the balcony as the news of William's wedding reached the capital. The bells of the city were ringing. People were celebrating the hero of the North. Alex felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his chest, the final severing of the biological bond. It felt like a physical thread snapping in his soul. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. And then, a strange, hollow peace followed. The 90% match was gone. He could no longer feel William's presence across the distance. He was truly, utterly alone. He looked out toward the horizon, toward the north. He knew now that he could never fix what he had broken. William was happy. William was loved. And the greatest punishment for Alex wasn't the loss of his status or his health. It was the knowledge that he had been given a soulmate, and he had treated him like an enemy. Alex set the wooden bird on the balcony railing and let go. He watched it fall into the garden below, disappearing into the shadows. Be happy, Will, he whispered, his voice disappearing into the wind. I'm sorry I didn't know how to love you until you were gone. Alex turned back into his cold, dark room. He would spend the rest of his life as a cautionary tale, the young master who had everything but understood the value of nothing.